Welcome back to Currently Right Now, Wife, Mom, Me. This is your host, Ariane Mayweather. And listen, we've had a lot going on this weekend, but of course, I wanted to bring you guys something. So I was talking to my nephew, Chucky, and this episode is dedicated to him because he gave me the title just in the midst of he and I talking, and he was explaining to me about a coworker he has who is in a toxic relationship. And we're talking about it, we're laughing about it, and not that it's funny, but when you hear those things, I think immediately everybody is like, whew. If you're not going through it, you're just, a sigh of relief. You're like, whew, shit, thank God that ain't me. But, in the midst of him talking, he's like, oh my God, like I keep telling him, like, bro, what are you doing? You got to get out of this toxic twirl. And I literally hollered. I said, what? And he said, the toxic twirl. And I said, oh my goodness, you're hilarious. That is so right. It is exactly what it is. It's a toxic twirl because it's the cycle of abuse. So this episode, the toxic twirl, we are going to really take a deep dive into how two people who have no business getting together get together. Like literally, you got this person's phone number, let alone you shouldn't even had their name. And y'all got together, and now you guys are bringing the worst out of each other. And I will say with this episode, for me, it will get personal because I was in a toxic twirl, but it was madness. And I was about 21 years old, 21 years old, well into almost 35, before my marriage / relationship ended with my girl's father. And it was really toxic. So we're just going to take a deep dive into how it starts off, how the beginning of the relationship is to the middle to the end before, someone says, we are doing each other injustice. We're doing harmful things to one another. We got to stop. And, you've seen things play out where someone they aren't able to get out of the situation. I mean, we all know Snapped. We've all seen an episode. We've all heard about an episode. And those things do occur. And with the toxic twirl, depending on the level of toxicity in the relationship and the abuse, you know, at some point it will and can get physical. And what are the steps? Like, when did I take that left? Where did I where did I go effed up at that led me here? And the unfortunate part is, realistically, I don't think anyone in it, when you're going through it, no one wants to really hurt anyone. Like, you're going through this relationship, things aren't the best, but you cannot get out of it. But your heart posture, your brain, your conscious mind is like, I don't want to hurt this individual, and I don't want this individual hurting me. But when you're in the moment and when you are going through it, and it is a tornado of nonsense hurling at you, you are not in control, because your feelings you're overly emotional. Whatever it is you're seeing, red, anger, hurt, pain, and you can't make the best decision, and your judgment is all thrown off because you're not using your brain. At that point, it's turned off. And I just hope that, talking about this would help someone. And I am going to put a bit disclaimer. I have 4 daughters. My oldest knows a little bit, but none of them have ever been really privy to what I've endured and dealt with. But I will say this: nurture versus nature is something else. Sometimes things are just innate in our children. They don't necessarily have to see it happening to us, but it could be wrapped in their DNA. And as a mother, as a parent, I think it's always best to be as honest with your kids as possible without bashing the other party, so that you can potentially or help or to avoid them walking down the same path. Like, What are the things you should be mindful of? Because again, we can live in these fantasy lands and of, worlds of delusions, but one thing is for certain and two things are for sure. These kids are on social media, and I know we've all, if you have Instagram or TikTok, we've all seen the reels or the TikToks where it's a skit or they're acting out like the girl being crazy or the guy being nuts, and he's being super duper toxic, and we're laughing about it, and you're watching it, and it is funny because I'm sure some of us have had that situation where you're like, oh, okay, so I get to see what I look like in real time via somebody else making a skit or someone just happening to record. If nothing else, you can't do nothing in private anymore. Someone is recording you, but you see it go down and you're just like, okay, that's toxic. But then, God forbid, if you've ever been in that situation, you're like, oh shit, this is toxic. Like it's not okay. And Instagram and TikTok have glorified and made it glamorous to be with someone where they say, where it's like, I love you so much, I'll hurt you or I'll end you. And that's not okay. And it's not glamorous. And that is not love at all. And I think what tends to happen is, I think a lot of people feel like the opposite of love is hate or the opposite of hate is love. No, the opposite of love is indifference. Because I don't think you ever really stop loving anyone. I think when a relationship is over and however many years, you're just kind of like, even if that person did the worst of the worst things for you, you don't stop loving them. It just switches into indifference if the relationship didn't end well. So you look at a person that you used to be with and you say, well, I do. I mean, I would hope that, we aren't going around hating people, especially if you've grown from that, you've gotten the proper healing and help from it. But you look at that individual or you look in the past and you go, you know what, I wasn't the best me. I wasn't the best version of myself when I was with that person. I brought out the worst in them. They brought out the worst in me. But I don't hate so-and-so. And I hope so-and-so is doing well and I want them to be well. I think that's always, the best remedy. But everybody ain't mean. Everybody doesn't feel that way. And it took me a long time to get to that place where I completely let it go. And it is all about forgiveness. And I have to remind myself every day that if I can forgive that individual, I can forgive others. And I have quietly. And I think I want to make it very clear that just because you forgive someone does not mean you have to continue to have the same relationship. And I think that is the misconception with a lot of people. That is where the confusion comes from. I can forgive you, but we no longer have to be together. I can forgive you, but I don't have to be your friend anymore. I can forgive you, but we don't need to talk every day or whatever the case may be. And that is a big part of forgiveness. And I think the person who is being forgiven, they have a hard time understanding that, where it's like, no, I forgive you. We're no longer together, but I'm not fucking with you like that no more. And it's hard to understand because I think people automatically think, well, forgiveness is a way back in. Absolutely not, especially if you have hurt me to my core or if I've hurt you to your core. We have to forgive and move forward. So the best thing I think is to take a look at, some stats when it comes to toxic relationships and when it comes to abuse, all levels, verbally, emotionally, mentally, and physically, and what that cycle of abuse looks like. And when you talk to people who've never really experienced it, they don't get it. And by not getting it, I mean the individuals who have never experienced any type of toxic relationship or mental, emotional, or physical abuse, they can't understand how anyone could endure that, or how did you even get there, or you have these preconceived notions, and by that I mean just older adults. But with these young kids, it's just so easy for them to get caught up in it, and that is where, as a parent, you should step in and help them recognize this situation is not healthy. and you should not want to continue and be a part of something that is not going to help you grow, thrive, and bring out the best version of you. So let's look at some stats. So I found the website, which is Domestic Violence Center of Chester County. I'm not sure what Chester County is, but it breaks down different levels of abuse. Fast facts and statistics. So intimate partner violence. Intimate partner violence. The statistics vary slightly, but approximately 12 million Americans are victims of rape, physical violence, or stalking by an intimate partner annually. This equates to about 24 people per minute. Intimate partner violence is very common. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men are victim to some form of physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. Intimate partner violence is most common among women between the ages of 18 and 34. Most female victims of intimate partner violence were previously victimized by a same offender. On an average, a victim of abuse, on average, it takes a victim of abuse about 7 attempts before they finally leave their abuser. Unfortunately, the violence often escalates after each attempt. That's pretty sad. Let's look at teen dating violence. This one's pretty interesting. 1 in 3 teens, regardless of gender identity, experience dating violence each year. I think a lot of us, and not everyone, but I think the majority of us always equate relationship abuse, toxic relationships, to the man being violent to the woman. When a lot of us as women, we can be violent towards our boyfriends, husbands, and I think that part is overlooked, especially with teens, because I noticed, and I said earlier, because of TikTok or because of Instagram, it's not because of the platforms, it's what people are choosing to upload, and that is what happens. So I want to clarify that. It is not the platform itself, it's what people who are using the platform, they're uploading, and we see these things, we laugh, and a lot of them, they're young people, and by young I mean under the age of 25, and it's really not funny, but we all laugh, and we should. And so teen dating violence. 1 in 3 teens, regardless of gender identity, experience dating violence each year. Only 33% of teens who were in an abusive relationship ever told anyone about the abuse. Violent behavior typically begins between the ages of 12 and 18. 81% of parents believe their teen dating violence is not an issue or do not know what it is. 1 in 4 teens in an abusive relationships are abused via cell phone communication and texting. Nearly 40% of teens engage in sexting, the act of sending and receiving sexually suggestive photos and messages. However, 61% of teens who have sent nude photos felt pressured by their significant other to do so. Abuse later in life. Every year, approximately 4 million older Americans are victim to a physical and psychological abuse and neglect. So let's take a look-see. Emotional and physical abuse. Nearly half of all women, 48.4%, and men, 48.8% in the United States, experience psychological aggression by an intimate partner in their lifetime. 95% of perpetrators who physically abuse their intimate partners also psychologically abuse them. Psychological abuse is a stronger predictor of PTSD in women than even physical abuse. 7 out of 10 women who are psychologically abused will display PTSD symptoms. So, and it talks about stalking. So let's talk about that. 62%, or approximately 2 out of 3 of female stalking victims were stalked by a current or former intimate partner. Over 40% of male stalking victims were stalked by an intimate partner or acquaintance. That is creepy. And if we want to just pin it right there, how many of us know, or even have done, followed somebody on Instagram, looked someone up, even the same thing on TikTok, and kind of just watched what they were doing? I guess that is a form of stalking, you know. Often it isn't really discussed, but it does happen. So repeatedly reviewing unwanted calls or text messages is the most common tactic experienced by both male and female victims of stalking. 1 in 6 women and 1 in 19 men experience stalking in their lifetime that made them fear that they or someone else close to them may have been harmed or killed by a perpetrator. 76% of women killed by their intimate partners were stalked first. That is really, really disturbing. So I found something else that was kind of interesting when I was looking this information up. Um, this is an overview on Google, and it said toxic relationships where one or both individuals exhibit harmful behavior are alarmingly common, with the study showing that 84% of women and 75% of men report experiencing some form of emotional abuse. This type of abuse can occur in romantic, platonic, and even professional relationships. The prevalence of toxic relationships highlights the importance of recognizing warning signs and seeking help to navigate these unhealthy dynamics. So how do we get there? How do we get to the toxic twirl? What tends to happen? Now, I'm going to put a disclaimer on this. This is trigger, so it just is what it is. I'm not going to go into deep details. I'm just going to state the situation. When I met my first husband, my younger girls, my 3 daughters, when I met their dad and I began dating him, we had an experience that started and that just led to years of it. So the first time it became physically abusive, we were driving in the car. We had a situation. He took my car. I let him use it. So he didn't take it. I allowed him to use it. Now he had been gone all day. And in my brain, I was like, where's my effing car? So I kind of had an idea about where he was, and I had someone drop me off to where it was. I saw my car. I took it. He didn't answer his phone, none of those things. So later that evening, he called me and he was like, I think someone stole your car. And I was like, nobody stole my car. I took my car. I mean, if it's not straight out of Baby Boy, I don't know what is. But whatever. And he's like, oh, come get me. Now, at this point, as I'm getting to know him, I'm not realizing that he has a drinking problem, but he was young. We were young. And he was very much 22 at the time. So I pick him up and he and I are going back and forth about it. And we're not yelling and we're not screaming, but he's very much of a can't understand why I would take my car. And my response to him was, well, I have a child. Why would you take my car from me all day long and I have things to do? Like, you don't pay the car note. But you know what? Essentially, that's my fault. So we're driving. Well, I'm driving. He's talking. And I realized at this moment, like, okay, he's been drinking or whatever. And so he's like, mentioning the movie. Oh, you for real? I for real thought somebody stole your car. And I was like, no, I took it again. And he's laughing. So I'm laughing. And before I know it, I'm struck. Not once, but twice. I saw Tweety birds. Now, in that moment when that happens, one would then say, okay, after you got to where you go and you're safe, why didn't you tell your dad? Why didn't you tell your brothers? Why didn't you just end it? Well, one, I thought about it and I was like, if I say something, then my dad and my brothers, it's going to be an illegal situation for everybody involved. And I just didn't want that. Now, why didn't, after all was said and done, the next day I say, you did X, Y, and Z to me. We're done. Like, you're not doing that. I was dumb, very dumb. And I didn't get it and I didn't understand it. And I will say in that moment, I was very much thinking, I have a child. I'm lucky he even wants to talk to me. Now, this is not the creme de la creme of people, but you're very kind to my daughter. You're being a sweetheart to her. And I just in that moment was thinking, I'm not going to be able to find anybody to date because I'm young and have a child. It was just all those things going through my mind. The next day, he and I spoke about it, and I said to him, you can't do that to me anymore. Like I didn't do that to you, so why would you do that to me? A promise was made. I won't do that no more. Fast forward as time goes on, that is happening more often than not. And from that, other things from now, I may necessarily not strike you, but my hands are around your neck. And then from there, it just goes on. And now it's not even physical in that moment. It becomes very emotionally abusive, very mentally abusive, very verbally abusive. Fast forward, now we are just in this toxic ugliness, this toxic twirl. And it's kind of like you don't know how to turn it off. But I will say I could start sensing and noticing the signs. What it did was it turned into when they talk about the cycle of abuse. So everybody's good. You got it's like, imagine a clock, if you will, a wall clock with the 12, the 3, the 6, the 9, and it has a hand on it. So we're at 12 o'clock. That is the honeymoon stage. We are great. Everything is fine. We're good to go. We're getting along. As the clock and the dial is going, we're going down. Okay, we hit a bump in the road. It's not positive. And now from there, it's turning negative and it's turning ugly. And now we are at each other's throats. And now I have learned exactly what to say to him to send him over the edge. Or I'm not doing nothing to him. I'm ignoring him because I understand you've been drinking, you're inebriated, and you're just acting ugly, and I don't want to deal with you. And from there, the abuse picks up again. So now here we are. We are right there in the midst of it, and it is turned ugly. And then, boom, we're back to the honeymoon stage. And I mean, the true epitome of what a honeymoon stage is. I'm getting flowers. I'm getting showered with, I'm so sorry. I won't never do that to you again. And it's a scene out of a movie. And when it is alcohol fueled, he didn't do drugs, but it's alcohol fueled by him. I don't drink. And those things are happening. And you really look back and you're like, how did I get here? How did I get here? What did I do to get to this place that is so ugly, so toxic, and I don't feel good about myself? I mean, at this point, I'm weighing easily 220. So I'm eating my feelings. I'm going through a really ugly time in life. And I definitely was acting that way towards other people. I mean, some people deserved the behavior I was giving them. I mean, I am very nice until I'm not nice. But in the same breath, I just wasn't my best. And I said to him after that last blow up that we had that got really physical, I said, we have to stop. This is terrible. Like, we're being so ugly to one another. We have young girls, they're watching us, and I can't continue like this. At this point, my weight was 220. I was eating my feelings. I didn't feel good about myself. I was ugly to myself. I was ugly to everyone around me. I just was not the best me. And he was unhappy. But the thing is, you're cheating on me, and then I find out, I confront you, and now you're mad at me. So now I'm getting popped. And it's just an ugly, toxic twirl of a mess. And it is so ungodly. It's just, we have to stop. And it's one of those things where looking back, obviously, you can't make people do anything. People have to want to stop cheating on you. People have to want to not physically hurt you, verbally hurt you, emotionally hurt you. That is something that individual has to want to not do to you. But if that individual doesn't love themselves, then you should think all bets are off. So he didn't love himself for whatever reasons he has. Therefore, there was no love for me. Obviously, at 20, 21, and so on and so forth, I'm not understanding that. I'm not getting it because I think I know everything, you know. And my parents told me straight up when they first met him, this ain't it. They said that. This, I don't know what you're doing, but this ain't it. And I did not listen. And you think when you're 20, 21, you think you know it all. If you just listen to your parents, life would just be a lot better for you. And I wish I had, because I endured a lot of stuff because of being hard headed. I did that. And everything that I went through with the girl's dad, I don't blame him. I really don't, because people can only do to you what you allow them to do. And I fully allowed all of that. I allowed the physical, the emotional, the mental. I allowed the cheating. I allowed all that. He did that to me because I let it happen. When I finally had enough and I was done with it all, I was completely done. Now, in the midst of all that happening, we were going to counseling. So it kind of took a turn from no longer being physical with one another. He would do things so I couldn't go to sleep. So I was experiencing sleep deprivation. And I had to get up and go to work. You know, it's just all these things. And I know people who've never experienced it, and you're talking to them and they're like, why would you even endure that? I was dumb. I was dumb. That is the best way I can describe that period of time. Like, clearly, I'm not obviously using the full brain and the good common sense God gave me, because I know better. And not only that, why, you know, I used to hear a lot of, if I talked about it, like, why didn't you tell your dad? Why didn't you tell your brothers? Because I didn't want them going to jail because I was being stupid. You know, I take full accountability for everything. And I always tell my girls now, especially, I did a lot of mistakes. I went through a lot of stuff. You don't have to. Mom did all the trips, bumps, and bruises on my forehead, as my dad used to say, a hard head make a soft ass. You know, I did all that. So you don't have to. And I definitely fear that they will ever encounter such a thing, because, like I said, they never physically seen anything, not that I'm aware of, but I think things are just within. And I do my best about preaching, you know, someone putting their hands on you, or what is love, what is not love. And you have to be very mindful and careful. And it's easy for a relationship where people are joking and wanting to be very controlling or possessive. And you see these TikToks where it's kind of like, I saw one today I thought was pretty interesting. So the guy comes outside in the TikTok, or the reel, comes outside to his car, and he has a note on it. There's a brick on top of a note, and the note said, "You better be glad I've changed and that I'm not crazy no more, or this would be through your window. I'm just letting you know." And then there was a note on the gas tank, and it said, "You are really out here about to make me lose it, because I could really be pouring sugar in your tank." And I chuckled to myself, because I thought, if whatever this individual is doing or is not doing, and it's causing you to react in such a way, you should just cut it. You know, obviously, the individual in the reel, they were young, but, and I know it was a skit, but I just thought to myself, this is something else. Like, it's not even funny, and you joke all the time, and you say these things, and by you I mean people in general, you know, about these toxic relationships, or, you know, you think you want to be manhandled and stuff. You don't want that. That's not love on by any means, on any level. And oftentimes what I find is people who end up in these relationships and they're so toxic, whatever love or things that they're lacking from inside. This is an inside job, because I didn't love me. And I remember right at the end, right before we completely ended the marriage, we went to therapy. And I remember our therapist was so angry at us, she threw us out. And I'm not even joking. She I mean, we were in there being so combative, and I was so angry, and I was so upset with him. And I was angry because he wasn't getting it. But it was kind of like, girl, he don't get it. He don't give a damn. He really doesn't. And for whatever reason, you aren't understanding that he doesn't, and you care more than he does. And I used to say all the time, I can't want to be married more than you. Like, that's not how this goes. But the therapist was like, you two clearly are at an impasse. You need to figure out if you want this marriage or not, because at this point, we're just chasing our tails here. I'm giving you guys advice. I'm trying to tell you guys, teach you guys on what to do, and it's not working. I will say the one good thing that did come out of that was she told us, one of the tools she gave us was having dinner with our kids. Like, it doesn't matter, even if you're not hungry, sit down with them, listen to their day. Even if you take a little bit of food and push it around on your plate, that is the time where you guys need to be together. Now, for me, I never stopped doing that. When the girls eat dinner, I sit down with them and eat dinner. Now, am I perfect? Do I do it every day? I do it maybe 5 days a week when we're all together. But I remember he participated in that for a few days, and then of course he was gone. But at the same time, in that, I just was so angry at him because I was like, you don't even care about them, but that's my fault. He's not doing the exercises and the homework and the things that need to be done. He don't want to be here. I've never met somebody that don't want to be married more than you. And the cold part is, he told me many a moons ago, before we even got there. I didn't listen. So everyone, let this be a lesson. Quit letting people tell you they don't want you more than once. Now, in the same breath, he'd say, I want you, but I don't want to marry you. I don't want to be married. And it wasn't necessarily, like he said, it's not you. I don't want to be married till I'm about 40 something. Now, granted, we did everything ass backwards. And then understanding the level of heaviness that marriage was for him, it's a big responsibility. And it's not for everyone. Everybody should not be married. And everybody doesn't understand the position of a husband, especially the person who's never saw a marriage being played out in a proper manner. And no matter what he saw with my parents, it just was not in him. And that's okay. That is okay. And I used to tell him all the time, you're not a husband, it's not it. And it's okay. And towards the end, when the therapist told us, y'all need to figure out if y'all are going to be married or not, I was so angry. So when we got back, I just said to him, I think I'm done with this. Like, I am. And, we were upset, so we didn't speak the rest of the day. But I think he thought I was playing, and I wasn't. I was not playing at all. Because you can't keep cheating and doing these things and then expecting me to be cool. I'm not. I'm not cool, and this is not okay. And I want to physically harm you. So now I'm here. I want to physically harm him because of what is happening. That's when we got to cut it. Now you think, oh, you've been getting popped. You've been letting stuff ride. So why now? Why now? And maybe it's because of the girls, and as they're growing and getting up there, all I kept thinking to myself was, what if they were teenagers and they saw this? This is not going to be okay. And with that toxic twirl of events, you feel like you're in a tornado and you just can't quite get out of it. It's like the exit keeps passing you, and every time you try to get out of it, you're being wooed back in, and it is very ugly and it is very dark. And I'm only talking about this because this is my experience. This is what I've experienced. And I see so many young people who are currently going through it, and you can kind of see where they're making the wrong left turns at, where you're like, that is not okay. I only hope that anybody listening to the sound of my voice, if they're going through this, that they stop immediately. Like, get off the ride. It is only going to end in worse things. Because what then happens is when someone can't possess you, when someone can't control you, their anger grows. And the more you stay, the more it comes across as though you're allowing it. For me, I think when I think about my daughters, I don't ever want them in that. And I don't think my father and my mother ever wanted me in that. Obviously, of course they didn't, and then you just think as you're being a human and you're going through these things and you think you want to make these decisions and you're 20 something and you're going through it and you're in your early 30s and you're going through it. But now at 43, going on 44, I look back and I just think, oh, what a fucking dummy. Like, what was your real malfunction there? It's not that I didn't have the proper love. My parents loved me. I listen. I had the best father in the world. Can't nobody's dad compare to mine. And I know people have some awesome dads out there. I had the best dad. I didn't have any daddy issues. My mother loved us. But I will say, my mom. Listen, I had the best mom out there. I joke and I say things about my mom and I tease or whatever. I had an awesome mother. I knew she loved us. My mother was a functioning alcoholic. It just is what it is. But at the same time with that, she wasn't abusive to us. Now, I mean, she cussed us out smooth, clean, but she was not abusive to us. So this was my undoing. This was my nonsense that I created. And I will say, if I could think back to it, it was because I had a baby young. The person I had a child with, I should have been married. They said they wanted to get married. I believed them, but I got pregnant before the marriage happened. And that was so foolish. Don't get me wrong. I love my daughter. Angelique is literally the absolute best firstborn, the best oldest sister. She taught me a lot about myself. We grew up together because I'm 19 and I have her. And, I was a kid and she knew I was a kid because she used to tell me to my parents. But it was the best experience. Now, thankfully, she wasn't abused. Thankfully, she didn't pick up any of those horrible traits and do any of that. And I will say, to his defense, if that even makes sense, he was kind to her. He loved her. But again, we're talking about somebody that only had the ability to love to what he understood love was. But again, he didn't love himself. So fast forward here, our daughters together. And again, he is being an active father in the midst of things. But once we're done and once the toxic twirl is over and once the tornado has died down, you're mad at me. You're mad because I said enough. I said, I don't want this anymore. Like, I don't want this toxicity anymore in my life. And I don't want my kids to ever be a part of it. And they can see. I don't want my children coming up to me and them saying, I remember that one time or any of that stuff. They're already going to have to do a lot behind his mistakes that he made outside of our marriage. So in this whole toxic twirl of things, when you find yourself in it, when you find yourself, listen, this is not one of those things where it's a whole Karen moment where you're like, it feels like you might hit me. No, that's not what this is. These things happen little pieces at a time. Like, I could look at a young couple and tell if it hasn't gone physical, it's slowly about to. And when you see certain things or how people are behaving and stuff, and oftentimes you see girls popping dudes. And my thing is, if you're with a man or a young man and he's cheating on you, you slapping the shit out of him ain't gonna stop him from getting it popping on the side. If you want to mess around, just leave. If you feel like you have to physically put your hands on somebody to get them to understand where you're coming from or whatever, just leave. And that was my sign right there. Like, I want to end you, but I can't. I gotta go. Like, I gotta go. You're taking me to a level that I shouldn't be at. And I think often we think it's funny and it's a joke when we see things, but it really isn't, because the two people in it, whether they're aware of what they're doing or not, it's horrible. And for the young man that is feeling like he needs to be so possessive of this girl, and you got to have that liquid courage in you to get yourself to be able to control her physically, and you think slapping her is the way? No, because you won't want nobody putting their hands on your daughter. And you better believe that whatever you're doing to somebody else's daughter, one day you're going to have kids. And if you have any daughters, what you did to someone else's, somebody will more than likely do to yours. It just comes around full circle. And that is always my goal with my kids, because yeah, your dad was this, but you don't have to marry that same thing. You don't have to endure what mom endured, because I was foolish and I did that, you know? So at the end of the day, for me, when we talk about the physical abuse and the toxicity and the, you see it happening and it brews very slowly. And before it's the whole, oh, I don't want you being friends with so-and-so, or you can't do this or that. And then you listen to them. Meanwhile, you got a whole daddy sitting at home, or, whatever the case is, but you're listening to them. And then from there, it's, I can do this, but you can't do that. And it's like, okay, but we're young, we're not paying attention. And then before you know it, it slowly just escalates. And then there's a situation and you and that person are talking so reckless to one another and saying the most heinous things to one another. And it just is going and going. But now, because you know who you're with, you know who your boyfriend or girlfriend is with, so you know exactly what to say to them to set them off. If you've been with anybody longer than a few months and you all have both been vulnerable with one another, or you've seen something and it's been discussed and it's insecurity of that individual's, we all know that that's their kryptonite. So we throw it up in their faces. Now, when you throw something up in someone's face that is unsavory and they've shared with you, be prepared to probably get slapped. Because one, you doing that is mistrust. No one, I have a saying, like, if whether you're a friend, you're dating, whatever, husband, wife, whatever the case may be, sibling, if I told you something in confidence and I told you something when I was being vulnerable, and later we're having a disagreement and we don't see eye to eye, you don't get to throw that up in my face, especially if it don't have nothing to do with the situation. Like, why would you do that? I've had that happen to me several times. And I'm always shocked and stunned that the person does it. And all it did for me was, in that moment, I just don't share shit no more. Because it could be a friend that does that shit to you. And you're just like, wow, you really did that? But it hurts even more when it's a partner. I hate the word partner, I'm sorry. It hurts even more when it is somebody that you're in an intimate relationship with. And it doesn't have to be sexually physical. If we are boyfriend, girlfriend, if we're husband, wife, whatever we are, if we are intimate and we love one another and we are in a romantic relationship, and I've shared something and I was vulnerable, and then you took that and you threw it in my face in the midst of an argument, and we're talking about frogs and cats, and here you come with this shit. Now I want to fuck you up. But can I? No. But why would you do that to me? And for the individual doing it, knowing you can't beat up the other person, that's insanity. That is madness. So what you've just done now, you know exactly what you said to rile that person up. You know you're probably going to get popped. And for the individual hearing it, like, wow, I told you something about my childhood, or whatever the case may be, and we're arguing, and you throw that up in my face, the restraint on that individual to not physically hurt you has to be studied. Because again, I know there's, what is that saying? Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is absolute bullshit. That is absolute craziness. Should we be bothered by the things people say? No. But are we? Yes, we're human. We are not, steel. Stuff don't slide off of us. You know, we're it's impossible. Now, as you get older and you age a little bit, I mean, I'm over 40, so a lot of stuff doesn't bother me as much, but words still hurt. I'm human, I have feelings. Words do still hurt. So when you are going back and forth with someone and you do that, and you throw something up in someone's face and they restrain themselves and they don't physically harm you, especially depending on the level of what that is or what was said, that should be studied, and you need to have a seat, because you know exactly what to say to the person you're dealing with to get them to that level of anger. You know exactly what you're doing, because it's almost like when you're being toxic, it's like you're inviting in the physical part of it. So we've just got through verbally and mentally and emotionally hurting one another. Now the next step is physical. But I just want to know, for the people who like that, I'm always curious, why? Why do you feel like that's love? I've seen, you've seen shows like a Maury Povich or Ricky Lake, or, Dr. Phil and things like that, where people talk about abuse. And I'm just using those talk show hosts because they seem to always have those type of talk shows, or even like Oprah back in the day, where it's like, I didn't feel like he didn't love me if he didn't hit me, or him to her, because men are quite special creatures. If a man is getting his ass whooped at home by his wife or his girlfriend, he ain't telling not nobody, because he will be slaughtered. He would get drugged through the mud if a man said, hey, my girlfriend, my wife physically abuses me, and you let her, and your strength versus hers. But there are some women out there that do it. There are some women out there, that will verbally hurt their husbands and say the most awful things to them. But if he did it to you, you would be hurt. You would be appalled. You'd clutch your pearls. Yet, it's okay. Like, I don't even understand where we are with this. Like, it is always amazing to me with that level of vitriol, and I understand we get mad and we get upset, but at the same time, we have to learn how to control ourselves better. So, I think I'm often confused with that. And I think I'm confused at it from a perspective of someone who doesn't go around popping people. You definitely have those moments where you're like, if I could put my hands on you, I definitely would. But what is the outcome going to be if that happens? But I'm always amazed at women that belittle their husbands or boyfriends and then say the most egregious things to them, and they walk away unharmed physically. And then the next day you want to apologize and say, I'm sorry I said those things to you. No. So if you are that person and you're listening to me and you're saying something to your boyfriend or to your husband that is wrong, stop. And you should be lucky that person's still with you, because it hurts. It really does. And what you're doing is setting yourself up for failure, because once respect leaves a relationship and now you guys are volatile, and right now it's just a verbal, it's eventually at some point in time, it's going to get physical. It really is. And for anybody who has never gone through that, and you're that individual that sits back and says, how did it even get there? Like, why would you endure that? Please be patient with people. Please have a little bit of empathy. There are a lot of people who don't want that. There are a lot of people who, for whatever reason, don't know how to get out of it. And it sucks. It really does. I think with the therapy and the counseling, and then after the marriage was over, I did therapy again. It's a great tool, and it does help you understand how you got to point B, because you go back and you talk about a lot of things, and it does help with accountability. As you grow and you learn and you come across new experiences, you understand that in that moment, you and that individual brought out the worst in one another. Sometimes people just aren't good for one another. And if you're growing up together and you're young and you're going through things and you have substances involved, alcohol, there's cheating, at the end of the day, you have to save yourself. Sometimes people are hurting so bad that they cannot let go of you, but you should be the most important person. And I'm talking to people who are experiencing this now. Nobody is more important than your well-being. And I'm not talking about the silliness of, oh, I'm not happy and this and that. No, this is for reals. Like, you're being physically abused, emotionally abused, mentally abused. Your happiness from a perspective of, this does not serve me. I bring out the worst in you, you bring out the worst in me, and we are doing heinous things to one another. Because eventually, at some point in time, those tables do turn. So where you're the victim or the other person is the victim, they'll eventually start fighting back. And then it turns into Friday night fights. And it's not so much he came in and he hit me, or she just slapped me for no reason. Those events turn into, now we're duking it out. And when that happens, now you got two people just swinging on one another, and it's awful. It is awful. When we could just avoid all this and we could just say goodbye to one another, go get the help that we both need to understand, what is it that I am doing and being to myself that allows another person to think that they could do this to me? And then why am I allowing it? Why am I allowing this person to say these things to me? Why am I allowing myself to be treated this way? What does that say about me, and how much do I love myself? And when you're allowing, yourself to be abused in any form of fashion, that says a lot about how you care about you. And I was very young, and I had this baby that I loved so much, and I didn't want her to grow up without a dad. And then, for me, when I look back at that, I thought about it and I said, what was it that made me think that I wouldn't have found anybody else, or that caliber of individual was all I could get? And I just remember my dad being very adamant about me having a child out of wedlock, and him saying, Pumpkin, now that you have a baby, you're not going to be able to find a husband. You have to think about her. When I think back to that, and what he was trying to really express was, or what he should have said was, and granted, my father wasn't a perfect person. What I heard in that moment was, you have a daughter now. No man will want you, no matter how good of a woman you think you are. Now, I am 43 years old, and when I look back at life and look back at experiences, was it hard to date with a child? Yes, it was. So when I found my ex-husband, I seemingly clung to him because I was like, well, I have a daughter, he wants me. And essentially, what my father should have said to me was, listen, you have a daughter now. Your choices in who you are choosing to date and the people you want to bring around your daughter, you're going to have to be very mindful of that. Because if you want to get married, you have to be the best version of yourself in everything that you do. And you need to pick someone that is going to be an awesome dad to your daughter. And I know we have a lot out there in the social media world, and you have people where they're like, oh, don't, stepdads or simps and all that other jazz and stuff. And my thing is, people do fumble. Life. It just is what it is. And we're young and we have these awful experiences that we shouldn't have had, depending on the level of hard-headedness of us. But there are good men out there. And if you are a good woman and you missed the mark when it came to having a baby out of wedlock, not that you've been very cavalier with your love life and your body, but those things do happen. And we will be foolish to sit here and say that men will not date women with kids. That is further from the truth. It happens, they do. Now, to get a man of quality, to get a man of sustenance, to get a really good guy that is very kind to you and can be kind to your child and raise them as their own, you as a woman have to understand that, okay, what do I need to be and become to get this guy? And I wish my dad would have said, listen, something's going right here. You keep missing the mark on this. Let me help you pick a good guy because you failed the first time. So now you have a baby. Um, Clearly you want to be married. You want to be in a relationship. Let me help you vet properly. But I think my dad low-key was afraid of me being mad at him or something. And I think sometimes as parents, now that I am one and I have these teenagers, I have to be very mindful how I step because they get so angry at you and they forget that you were once their age. You know, I tell the girls all the time, I didn't wake up 40. I didn't wake up 43. I was once 15. I was once 16, 18, 20, 25, 30. I do know a little something about something. And but oftentimes I think about them, and when I'm telling them stuff, you know, they don't want to hear it, and you just don't want to hear their mouth. I don't want to hear my mama's mouth. Nobody wants to hear their parents' mouth. But at the same time, I'm trying to tell you something good here, but you think you know it all. And some kids have to bump their head. I can really truly say when I look back at everything, I don't want to bump my head. I just wanted to give my daughter a dad. And I failed twice. I failed twice with the first one. Here I come with the second one. I'm failing miserably again. And now we got 4 hurt people versus just the one daughter. So again, like I said, I took a step back. So if you find yourself in this position and maybe you don't have kids, but you've been in a toxic twirl and you were married or you didn't get married, man or woman, and now you're out of it, I strongly encourage you to do some therapy. Even if you don't want to go, there are so many self-help books that you can utilize, but you should get therapy. Even if you go once a week, do the work, take the tools that are given to you. And the thing is, you don't know therapy is working or not until you're faced with another situation, something similar, not necessarily abuse, but when you get yourself back out there again. And it's really eye-opening because you start seeing where you have or can take a left turn, where you're pretty much introduced to a seemingly same situation. And then in that moment, you start recalling things from the past like, oh, this has happened before, or, this person seems familiar. And what I often find funny about women who say this all the time, more so women than men, I was in these situations, I keep attracting the same type of dude. Everybody attracts everybody. Everybody can be attracted to anyone and vice versa. You don't have to entertain them. So you hear this thing where it's like, I only date street dudes and that's all that's attracted to me. That's not true. And you don't have to entertain them, but you have to change your palate. What do you have a taste for? What are you typically attracted to? And then when you look down the line of all your exes, you can see the level of mental retardation. Like it is something really interesting when you really look back at it, when you can look and line up everybody that you've ever dated and you can kind of see where you have failed at as a human. And I say that from a perspective of, we are great at learning. The human brain is wonderful, and you can unlearn bad habits as well. Get the therapy. Do the things you need to do. Get the tools. Read the self-help books. And at the end of the day, it was God. I remember when I finally said to him, I'm done with this. I felt God. Prior to that, when we were really in the thick of it, God had took his hands off me. That's how it felt. And I don't think God ever took his hands off me, but that's how it felt because I was free falling. And it was scary. And I was trying to go at it alone. I wasn't praying. I wasn't in the word. I wasn't doing any of that. Fast forward, afterwards, I started dating somebody else and I dated them for a year. This is the tricky thing about abuse. You think anything that is better than what you're currently in is good. No, it just is a little bit different. Now, that individual was not abusive to me physically or mentally or emotionally. He wasn't. But it was not the best situation. It was a situationship. I didn't know that at the time. And my niece-in-law, Brittany, she would go, how did you not know that? And I'm like, I don't know, because it was better than what I was dealing with. And this is why when you're in a situation and you get out of it, you really should take a deep breath and refocus back on you. Don't get in nothing new. But I was in that. Now, the good thing about that was he was quote unquote into God, and it encouraged me to read the Bible. And that is because a statement was made one day about a particular verse and he utilized it. And later that day, I went back home and I opened up my Bible, and I instinctively, and it was nothing but the Holy Ghost, I read the verse above it and I read the verse below it, and it all formed together. And that is why, if you are a baby Christian out there, if you don't know God, but you believe in God and all that other stuff, don't you ever let nobody tell you about the Bible. You have access to opening up the Bible and reading it yourself. And we are, as a prophet named Tiffany Montgomery likes to say, we are filling an open book. The Bible is there. Open it, read it, learn it, understand it. And it tells you, come to me like a baby. Come to me like a baby. Ask God to give you the wisdom and discernment to understand this Bible. And there's dictionaries out there. You could Google, what is the meaning of this? I don't understand this. I got into my word. I read. That relationship ended, thank God. And my sister-in-law, God love her, Danielle, she had a long conversation with me. She said, you went through the marriage. That wasn't it. Okay. You went through that situation for a year. That wasn't it. Maybe have a seat. And I'm so thankful for her that she said that to me, because I really, truly needed it. I was done with the marriage. I was over it. My kids were still mourning the divorce of their parents, and they needed my undivided attention. So I stopped dating. I was a recluse from a perspective of, I wasn't dealing with nobody. I didn't talk to nobody. I cut off a bunch of people. I blocked a bunch of people, and I got into the word. I read my Bible. I started taking the girls to church, and I just began to cultivate my relationship with my children and with God, and mending that. And I knew it wasn't time. I read several books in that time. I read The Secret. Again, shout out to my niece-in-law, Brittany. And she had been wanting me to read it. And I was like, I don't want to read it. It sounds like witchcraft. And then I opened it, and it gave several Bible references. And I knew who I was in God. I read it. I applied things. It's just very much an optimistic book about optimism and being positive. And I really understood who I was. And it was the best decision for me, because I really got to understand my children. And I will say, early on, right when we divorced, I started planting seeds in my kids' head from a perspective of, mom will get married again. You guys will have a stepdad. This is what's going to take place. Your dad is going to start dating again. I never bashed my kids' father. And I think that is part of the toxic twirl, especially if there are kids involved. Somehow we end up wrapping our kids up in it, especially if they see it happening. It can be ugly when you see children involved in the toxicity, and then you lie to your kids and you tell them these awful things about their parent, and then you are doing your best to tear them down because you and the person are no longer together and it's not working out. So you want to destroy your children's relationship with their parent, with their mother or their father, when in retrospect, why would you do that? Because at one point you loved them, you wanted to be with them, but because they don't want to be with you, now you're gonna tear up that relationship. And we will go into that in the next episode of ex-husbands can be bitter baby mamas too. We're going to break down the whole bitter baby mama and bitter baby daddy thing and how it happens, but it all stems from this toxicity and stuff. Because once you cut off your abuser, they can't believe it. They're like, wait a minute, why would you cut me off? And then it manifests and grows, and then they start planting seeds in the kids as well. But I planted seeds in the kids from a perspective of, I'm going to get married again. I know, listen, I love love. I'm a lover girl. I wanted to be married since I was 3 years old and I can remember, but I never wanted to stop my ex-husband. He was doing what he wanted to do anyways, but it's like, okay, we have these girls, we have these kids. If you're going to be spending every other weekend with them, I would love it if you could be around somebody that was cool and that, you know, had common sense and would love on them and isn't abusive, isn't toxic, isn't none of that stuff. And I would say that to them, and we would have in-depth conversations. And at first, you know, kids, they reject stuff. But this is what is happening. We ain't together no more. And I know you don't like it, and that is fine. But this is just what it is. So how do I get my kids on board to accepting me meeting somebody and making them their stepfather? How do I get my kids on board to, hey, your dad is dating someone. This is the person he's with. This person cares about him. Clearly, she cares about y'all. Accept her. Don't be mean to her. Plus, I've had my experiences listening to other people who were step parents and what they were going through. But in that moment of reading, listen, Stefan Speaks or Stefan Labossiere, he has several books. I read the Man God Has for You, God, Where's My Boaz? He has one on healing after heartbreak, something of that nature. But he has several books out, and they were really, really good. Listen, I'm busy. It's all audible. So I read The Secret, and I listened to Stefan on Audible, and they were really good books. And then when I said, okay, I am ready to date again 3 years later, I really took my time. I listened to, you know, my spidey senses when something didn't feel right. When I felt myself rushing, you know, I slowed down. I wooed my horses, and I really found myself coming across some interesting gentlemen, and I could see the toxicity written all over them. Like you just have these moments where you have men, and I think they think, not all of them, that girls want to hear that stuff. Like women want to hear that. Like one guy was just like, I know I just met you, but we together. What? Like, you're nuts. We're not, sir. I promise you we're not. And he was like, yeah, we are. We're together. I can't, I'm never going to let you go. And I'm just like, now, what if I was a friggin' serial killer and I was going to chop up you and all your little baby kittens? But he was just like, I know you're not a killer. I know you're not nothing. You're a sweetheart, and I want to make you mine, and I don't care. And you could go on dates, but I'm going to be right there with you, wrecking them. And I just was thinking to myself, like, okay, this is wild. In the moment, I thought it was funny, and I laughed. And afterwards, we texted one another, and at this point, I'm going on coffee dates. So I met him at I guess it wasn't Starbucks. It was another coffee house. And afterwards, I'm like, okay, whatever. But as I'm texting him as the days go on, and he's becoming very aggressive via text, and calling, and just like, I don't care what you say, we're together. So now here it is. I'm 39, 38. 38. No, 39. I'm 39. I should know better, right? I've seen this before. You don't know me from a can of paint, and you are telling me I belong to you, sir. Bye. I blocked him, and I never dealt with him again. And we're not even intimate. Like, what? Like, I had one coffee date with you, and I didn't even drink no coffee. I drank water. And you're acting like this. You don't even know me. Immediately, you're nuts, like off the chain. I've had other encounters like that, where, um, listen, it doesn't matter because I'm married now, and that guy is the best guy ever. But I will say, you have to be vigilant. You have to be so very much aware of what you left in the past and who you're growing to be now. And give yourself grace. In the beginning, I didn't give myself any grace. And when I went back to therapy, that was one of the first things she said to me. She said, "You're doing everything you're supposed to be doing, and you don't feel good. So you're doing the right thing. Give yourself some grace." And that was just the best thing ever, because I didn't. I was so mad at myself for all that I allowed to happen, being with someone who just took advantage of my kindness and who I was, and because I loved them, and one thing that individual used to say to me towards the end of it was, "Well, Ariane, you love me." He would say that all the time, and that was part of the abuse, and it was part of the dropping seeds. "Well, Ariane, you love me. You love me." And once I finally came up out of the fog and the cloud of sickness, the last time he said that to me, he said, "Well, Ariane, you don't want to leave me because you love me." I say, "You're right. I do love you. But if I love you, who loves me? Because this ain't love at all." So with that, I gathered who I was, my little bit of self-respect that I had, and God got me clean, smooth up out of there. And looking back now, I give myself a lot of grace because, I was in a situation that was awful, but I take full accountability of my behavior. I take full accountability of what I've allowed to happen. And as far as I'm concerned, I will never be back there ever again. And when it comes to my daughters, they will never be back there. But I hope this episode helps anybody under the sound of my voice. And if you are in something like that, I pray that Father God releases you from that, that he releases you from feeling like you have to be in it, and that he gives you the strength for you to come out of that, for you to love yourself more, to not endure anything that does not serve you and that only hurts and harms, and that you recognize immediately, me and this individual are hurting one another. And before it gets really bad, we have to stop and get out. So thank you for listening and bearing with me through this. And maybe it sounded like I was kind of all over the place, but I was doing my best, because at the end of the day, my kids still have a relationship with their father. I don't ever want to demonize him, based off of what I did and what I've allowed. And that is their dad at the end of the day. That is the person I chose to have children with. And again, he didn't do anything to me that I didn't allow. However, now I am healed. I am whole. I am the daughter of the Most High. And I understand. And everybody isn't loved properly, and everybody doesn't love themselves properly, which is why these things happen. But again, I love you all with the love of God for listening, and I bid you adieu and have a great, great day. Thank you.